Ursula von der Leyen says future relations with the EU's biggest trading partner, that's China, will depend on how Beijing deals with the war in Ukraine. The European Commission President is heading for the Chinese capital, where she says the focus will be on frank dialogue.
The EU Commission head is setting down a marker before her visit to China.
Our relations are not black or white, and our response cannot be either. And this is why we need to focus on de-risk, not decouple. And this is part of the reason why I will soon be visiting Beijing together with President Macron.
In early March, Chinese President Xi Jinping began his third term in office. Von der Leyen is critical of the extent of Xi's power and of his goals.
Chinese Communist Party's clear goal is a systemic change of the international order with China at its center. We have seen it with China's positions in multilateral bodies, which show its determination to promote an alternative vision of the world order.
The forging of closer ties between Russia and China is part of building this new world order. Xi's recent three-day visit in Moscow is evidence of this. Beijing hasn't condemned Russia's war on Ukraine, even seeing itself as a mediator. This is von der Leyen's analysis.
It is clear from this visit that China sees Putin's weakness as a way to increase its leverage over Russia. And it is clear that the power balance in that relationship, which for most of the last century favored Russia, has now reversed.
But China is also the EU's most important trading partner, as von der Leyen also mentioned. Those ties come with their own dangers. For example, exported goods could also be used for military purposes. Ahead of her visit, the Commission President stressed that the EU is very sceptical about China's growing autocracy and influence.
Well, let's dive deeper into this with Josie Marie Perkuhn. She's a China analyst at the University of Trier here in Germany. Welcome to DW. Does the Commission President's speech, do you think, mark a significant change of tone towards China?
Well, there is not a real shift in tone, but she was presenting this before. And I think what we see now is that she gets clearer on that. And that might also be the question why there is no direct response so far. I mean, like, remember the last time she spoke about China and the strategy, she was called toxic or toxic words from China Daily. And so right now there is not really a response. Probably because they don't know what to do out of it before she comes to China and see what actually she brings in.
And is there any evidence that any of this European or indeed American finger-wagging at China has any sort of effect?
Talking about what is the effect? Of course, there is an effect. However, is it the effect we want? And the squeezing together of Russia and China might also be an effect of this fingering or this red line pointing out and threshold. So I'm not saying that they are totally unsensitive about it. So it's very important to bring out what the EU stands for, what are the thresholds, what are the red lines. However, we will probably not see a direct effect. We will see only an immediate effect, like in later effect.
Understood. All right. So it strikes me that in Europe's relations with China, there's a pattern developing that European politicians go to China, but before they leave, they say China must do this, and China must stop doing this, and China must do this, and then they go and just do business. It's almost as though we have to say all this and get it all out there, and then we'll just go there and just do business. Am I being too cynical?
I would say, yes, you're too cynical, because I'm defending our European soul here to say this is not only a symbolic or something that has to be pointed out. Of course, it is a stand or a symbolic stand about what are the values. And sometimes I would give you that it is not only directed to China, but it's also directed to ourselves about the reassurance about this is what we want to stand for, because this is what we think is important. And this is what we bring then again back to China. However, we all know negotiation work in terms of finding compromises, and how these compromises are actually worked out, we probably won't see, because it's behind closed curtains.
OK. But Europe has a problem, though, doesn't it, in its dealings with China? Europe is not one thing. It's 27 countries. And as we heard in the report, we have the Spanish Prime Minister already in China. Germany's Chancellor took businessmen in November. Now Ursula von der Leyen appears to be riding the French coattails to Beijing. Divide and conquer does seem to be Beijing's European policy.
Well, you could also see that von der Leyen made such a clear statement, says this is the tone of Europe and where we want to head towards. And then other ones, countries can readjust to their needs. However, I would also say this divide and conquer is something we should not take over, because the most important is that the European Union speak with one voice or with one agenda, even though it's hard, and we are not the same. So this is the biggest difference compared China with the US. We can deal with neighbors and neighbor multilateralism. China can do also, but the US sometimes has a little bit of problems and see this as a paradoxy.
Because I'm looking at the way forward, and I'm seeing countries like Germany, which does so much business with China. Can you see Germany allowing Europe a strong enough policy that would make the European, that would propose European values, but undermine German exports to China?
Probably we would have a negotiation first that synchronizes this a little bit, or to deal with what are the European needs, because the European Union is not, there's not a body above it, but we are composed by the states. That's a democratic system we have. So this is how we are different from China, that can run from a top to bottom approach. Nonetheless, makes it harder, but it makes it sometimes also more reliable. And it also gives us the opportunity to deal differently with China, but still make the point about our values.
Thank you so much. Josie Marie Perkuhn, a China analyst from the University of Trier. Thank you.